Now we will begin our practice section. We'll begin a practice problem of a monohybrid cross. We're going to go through the monohybrid cross and then identify the genotypic and phenotypic ratios. So let's say we cross a homozygous recessive short plant. So we'll have the genotype homozygous lowercase t's. We'll put them in our little Punnett square here. And let's say we cross it with a heterozygous tall plant. So that would be a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So we'll put that into our Punnett square. And then we'll just match up the columns and rows. We'll go through and see that this capital T right here will go with a recessive allele, the dominant with a recessive allele. And then these will both be homozygous recessive alleles, resulting in short plants. So now let's change the color here to, how about yellow? Now we'll look at the genotypic ratio. So in the genotypic ratio, we're looking at the specific alleles that make up the cross. So we have one heterozygous tall plant, two heterozygous tall plants, and then we have, let's change the color again here, let's change it to, how about a blue? Then we have one and two homozygous recessive short plants. So we can just type in here genotypic ratio, it's really big, I'm sorry, 2 to 2. Now let's go through and find our phenotypic ratio. Let's do purple for this first one here. So our phenotypic ratio is the traits that actually show through. So we look at this one right here, has a dominant allele in it, as does this. So these will both be tall plants. Let's change the color real quick again. Let's change it to this reddish color here. Now for our final two, we see that they don't have a dominant allele because they're both homozygous recessive traits. So we know that our phenotypic ratio is also 2 to 2. There are two tall plants and two short plants in this cross. Now let's go through a dihybrid cross. This is going to be a little more difficult as it goes through two pairs of alleles instead of just one. So like in this example here, we can see tall plants and green pods mixed with short plants and yellow pods. So homozygous tall, homozygous green mixed with homozygous short and homozygous yellow. So these make all heterozygous tall and heterozygous yellow plants, which when you mix and match the alleles, you get a dominant allele of both a dominant and recessive allele, a recessive and a dominant allele, and both recessive alleles. You get those on both sides, and then you'll cross them in a larger Punnett square for the dihybrid cross. So here's a good example of a dihybrid cross. You have the dominant alleles, the round and yellow pea plant. You have the dominant allele round and the recessive allele green pea plant here. You have the recessive allele wrinkled and dominant allele yellow here, and the recessive alleles round or wrinkled and green here. And then you have the same on the downside. So when you mix them, you get these here. So what are the genotypic ratios for these heterozygous dihybrid crosses? The genotypic ratio is 1 to 2 to 2 to 4 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 1. That takes lots of years of practice, but it's 1 to 2 to 2 to 4 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 1. Meaning there's one homozygous round yellow plants, two homozygous round heterozygous yellow plants, two heterozygous round homozygous yellow plants, four heterozygous round heterozygous yellow plants, one homozygous wrinkled heterozygous yellow plant, two homozygous wrinkled homozygous yellow plants, one homozygous wrinkled plant, heterozygous yellow plant, two heterozygous round plants, homozygous green plants, and one homozygous wrinkled homozygous green plants. So that's how the genotypes work out in this dihybrid cross. The phenotypic ratio is 9 to 3 to 3 to 1, meaning there's 9 round yellow plants that you can see over here, 3 green wrinkled ones, or 3 yellow wrinkled ones, my bad, right here, and 1 green wrinkled one right here, the homozygous recessive for both traits. So I had a practice problem lined up for the lesson today, but due to time constraints, I also posted it on Moodle, and you guys can go take a look at that on your own time. You can pause the video and go look through it right now, or you can do it after the video or sometime during the week. But I want you to really make sure you practice the dihybrid crosses because it can be a lot and can be confusing. Remember also, ask any questions you might have and post them on the forum on Moodle. Genetics is widely seen in our lives around us. Basically everything that we see in anyone or in any organism is genetics. So it can be seen throughout our lives in things like eye color, hair color, blood type, genetic diseases, and so much more. Basically everything we see. So I want to ask you guys, do you recognize any similarities between you and your parents or your siblings? Pause the video or take a second to think about any similarities you guys might think you have. Because you're all related, genetics will kind of show through in similar ways in each of you. So like if you have blue eyes and blue eyes are recessive, and both your parents have blue eyes, then you and all your siblings will also have blue eyes, because the monohybrid cross for that would be homozygous recessive alleles on both sides, which would result in nothing but homozygous recessive offspring, which means you all have blue eyes. I really hope you guys find genetics as interesting as I do. It makes up basically everything we see around us, and studying even the little genetics, we can understand and even predict what traits are going to show through in what generations. So to give you guys extra practice, I have practice problems both with monohybrid crosses and dihybrid crosses, where you'll identify genotypic and phenotypic ratios after you perform the crosses. They're posted on Moodle. If you can't find them, I sent you guys that video that explains how to navigate Moodle and how to find the practice problems. Please make sure you at least look at them and make an attempt at them to get your practice in with these. We'll go over more of them in the next lesson, so I want you guys to really be prepared for that lesson. For an assignment for the week, you will have to turn in 2 of the dihybrid cross problems listed on Moodle and 2 of the monohybrid cross problems. And you guys will have to identify the genotypic and phenotypic ratios for each. So make sure you get that practice in and make sure you really understand how to do these crosses. Now to close, genetics makes us who we are. Dominant or recessive alleles come together and give us our phenotypic traits. There's so much we can learn about people or predict in people from their genetic makeups. Like if you're going to have blue eyes or brown hair, or what kind of blood types you have, or what kind of diseases run in your family or in other families. All this stuff can be traced and used through genetics. Genetics is truly amazing. Thank you guys.